What if someone tells you that blue does not exist? Now, I have a blue jacket kind of on right now. Yeah, it's blue, dark midnight blue with light blue. There's some white here. So you can see the blue. If I come closer, yes. What if someone from some East African nation or some African nation where they don't have a word for blue in their language sees and say, oh, there's a green textile he's wearing. Or you have some other African tribe that would say, oh, that's a shade of black. You would think, no, that's blue. And you will get all kinds of arguments and fights over what color it is. Now, it goes like this. Blue was not a common color that human beings got involved with in daily life. So they did not develop words for it. It's later human history, during the Roman era, and later under the influence of believers, that blue received a separate category as a word. Before that, people would often call it a shade of black or a shade of green. Now, there were some terms for blue specifically, but they were not used by the common public. All right? So, if someone was never socialized as a child to see blue as a separate category, then they will perceive blue as an extension of either black or green. Okay? So that's how their brains have been shaped. When they see when they see that shade of light that we call blue, they think, oh, it's an extension of green or it's an extension of black. That's how the human mind works. Unless you have been socialized into specifically mentioning something, you will not experience it as such. All right? I want you to consider this. So, the way you've been shaped by language also affects how you think. In a language where the pronouns of people are seldom used, like in Japanese, where there are also no plural for words, people tend to think different about themselves based on how they were shaped, because the language is how they relate to themselves. But in a language, for example, as Portuguese or Spanish, where pronouns are very important, even in the extension or say the end of verbs, it's important for you to mention who you're talking to. Now people relate differently. And also each noun is either feminine or masculine. So also that affects how they relate sexually with one another. So language affects how you think about yourself and others. That's why there are some languages which have certain words that cannot be translated in other languages, because what they call that in that language does not exist in other languages. For example, in Dutch, you have the noun gezelligheid. And the closest translation in English is homeliness, that you feel at home. But gezelligheid is more that people come together and they collectively flee whatever goes on, and they are in this state, other state of consciousness together. That's what gezelligheid really means. But for that phenomena, that people are in this kind of other state of consciousness together, you would call it hypnosis in English, literally. But if you would say that in Dutch, hypnose, in Dutch, hypnose is what the Dutch translation of hypnosis is. Hypnosis refers to something completely different. Namely, when an individual is subjected to a program. So that's how it goes with language. Sometimes you have terms that you cannot really translate easily. For example, in Portuguese, you have the word saudade. It's a kind of longing to whatever was, of which you know it cannot and will not come back, but you still hold on to it. In Dutch, you have a similar word for that called heimwee. In British, you would say homesick. So, when it comes to language, Each language has its categories or terms how to describe things. And based on the language someone has been socialized in, that's how they relate, how they perceive reality. Go back to the example of blue. If someone was never taught that a shade of light that we call blue is a separate thing, then they will not experience it as separate. All right? So if you put all types of green dots and one blue dot on a paper, and they're all different shapes, ask someone in a language without a specific word for blue which one does not belong. They can't tell you. But someone that grew up with a language where that shade of light that we call blue is a separate thing, they can easily say, oh, the blue one doesn't belong. For example, in English, you have lemon and lime. But in some languages, it's just a lemon, but they call it a green lemon instead of a lime. So there's also differences. So when someone in a language writes different categories for limes and lemons, when they say a lime, they say that's a lime. But in someone with a language where that's just another version of a lemon, they say that's just a green lemon. So the same it is with corn. When we think about corn today, we think about those yellow seeds. Okay, but corn in the 18th century could mean any type of grain. So if you read in an 18th century text about corn, you don't know what they're talking about. They can talk about wheat, they can talk about barley, they can talk about whatever type of grain it is. So the way we're socialized shapes how you experience and perceive reality. That's true. Why do I keep teaching this, and why am I highlighting this in this video? It is because the best way to keep a population under a spell is by putting the spells in the language. By putting the spells in the language, the same language people use in daily life, you can keep the population under spell. So, for example, if in a language people are not allowed to use the pronoun I, you're actually teaching people that they don't matter. Because I, that's you. Okay? So if you're not allowed to use I, that simply means that the I is not relevant. So in the minds of people, they're conditioned, you're not relevant. If in a language you are not allowed to use sexually associated words, what they're doing is they're sexually deforming you. Why? Because, or better, in that culture, because language and cultures are intertwined, when you're not allowed to talk about your human sexuality, which is your nature, they make you mentally ill. Because how can you be uncomfortable with what you are? So, consider that. It can be that some of the generational curses that have afflicted you come from the language you are socialized in. Okay, because who developed those languages? Who made the rules eventually? Pagans did over time. Okay, so they don't worship Christ. So where did they get inspiration from for constructing those languages? From unclean spirits. Well, I'm not saying that unclean spirits made those languages, no. But unclean spirits had a grip on those languages that they were shaped in such a way that people would be afflicted with spells automatically when they're socialized in those languages. English has its linguistic spells. Dutch has its own. Japanese has. Korean has. All languages have their linguistic spells on them. Okay, it doesn't mean you can't use a language. You can use a language. Just be aware of those linguistic spells. The moment you are aware, that moment you begin to process and you become delivered. The longer you remain unaware, the more the linguistic spells afflict you. Well, that's it for now. Keep on agreeing with Christ and be at peace.